So South Africa have named their squad for the Rugby World Cup, and it's one of the more interesting team selections out of all the nations that have named their World Cup squad so far, in my opinion anyway. I'll explain why in this video, but make sure you drop a comment down below. Let me know what you make of the squad and what you make of some of the controversial, some of the shock selections, in particular Lukhanyo Am, Lood, Jager and Pollard missing out. You can have your say in the comments section. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. I always really appreciate it, those of you that are able to do that. Trust me, it means an awful lot. But let's get into it. So let's get straight into it, shall we? I'll whack the team up on screen, just quickly run through it. The props, they've gone for 5 rather than the 6. Argentina actually did something similar, but it's Stephen Kitsoff, Vincent Koch, Frans Malherbe, Oxenche and Trevor Nyakane. The hookers, Bongi and Benambi and Malcolm Marks, only 2 there. Second row, Eben Etzebeth, Jean Klein, Marvin Ori and RJ Snyman. And then the back row, and there's a few utility backs, which is interesting actually that they've listed them as that on the team sheet in there as well. But Peter Steff, Sia Khaleesi, Quagga Smith, Marco van Staden, Dwayne Vermeulen, Jasper Wiese, and then Dion Fourie and Franco Mostert as those utility forwards as well. And then on to the back line, if I can bring that up. Faf de Klerk, Jaden Hendrikse, Cobus Reinach, Grant Williams for scrum halves, Marnie Libbok and Damian Willemse as the fly halves, centres Damien Dialende, Andre Esterhuis, Jesse Creel, and then the back 3, Kurt Lee, Arenza, Cheslin Kolbe, Willie Leroux, Makazole Mapimpi and Kanan Moody. So, South African fans, what do you make of that squad? What do you make of what Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber have gone for? As I say, I think this is probably the most interesting squad so far, because most of the other teams really that have picked their teams haven't had too many shocks. With England yesterday, we had the big selection over Henry Slade, which is interesting, but there hasn't been loads of things to talk about in the way that there maybe is with this Springbok squad. With Argentina, as I say, they selected 5 props to give themselves an extra back, which was interesting. Also something that South Africa have done in terms of having 5 props as well. And then maybe some of the other nations, Samoa and teams like that, it's been intriguing to see who the players are that now qualify based upon the residency rules changing. Lima Sopoaga, for example, being selected for Samoa, along with Stephen Luatua, a number of other guys. So there's been bits that are interesting in each squad, but I think the Springboks are the first one that we have a lot to talk about here. So do let me know in the comments what you make of it overall. First of all, regardless of what you make of this, whether you're disappointed with who's missed out, some of the selection decisions which we'll get into, which are confusing, I still stand by what I've been saying for a while, which is that South Africa are pretty stacked. They have an incredibly strong squad. I still think it's a squad that is capable of winning a World Cup. I think they need to improve. I think they need to build upon what we've seen so far this year, because undoubtedly the All Blacks are ahead of them. If Ireland and France can kind of pick up where they left off in the Six Nations, I'd probably put them ahead of them. But even so, I think South Africa will have a decent crack at defending their crown in France. Let's get into the injuries first of all. So Lukhanyo Am, Lood Jager and Pollard missing out. Lukhanyo Am, I saw on the press release that South Africa put out, is a 4-week injury. Picked it up in that Rugby Championship game against Argentina in Buenos Aires. I'd have thought if it's 4 weeks, then maybe he'd be okay. I was hoping to watch the Nienaber press conference before doing this video, because I'm sure he'll get asked about it and he might just expand on it. So if this information's maybe a little out of date, depending what comes out of the Springbok camp, but I'd have thought 4 weeks for Am. All right, maybe he's going to miss the start of the tournament, but I'd have thought he's still possibly worth having there if he's able to rehab and come back into camp and still play a part in the World Cup. But obviously they've gone for other options. Lood is kind of intriguing, actually. I hope we kind of send him best wishes, really, because he dropped out of the most recent game. Was it the most recent one or was it the one before? Either way, he dropped out of the match recently. And he had a chest problem. It kind of sounded like it was just an illness. But again, the press release saying that he's just kind of getting doctors' opinions on exactly what's going on there. So a bit of a strange one, but wish him well. And then Andre, with this calf injury, we haven't seen him at all yet this year for the Springboks. He picked it up for Leicester towards the end of the Premiership season, and we haven't seen him since. So maybe that's a more serious one. It does lead to some pretty interesting questions, though, for this South Africa squad. So if we look at the fly halves, let's start there straight away. You've got Marnie Libbok and Damian Willemse. I did a video on the channel months ago now asking if it should be Pollard or Marnie Libbok as the fly half for the Springboks. That was back when Pollard wasn't playing very well for Leicester Tigers. His form then improved, and I thought maybe he would still be the steady Eddie, that reliable pair of hands that can steer a game and control it, which sometimes you need at a World Cup. That's been taken out of the selectors' hands because of that injury. So Libbok, now I love him as a player. I think he's so exciting. He's almost very different to a lot of the fly halves we've seen over the years for South Africa, I love what he brings to the game. I would just be a little concerned at the moment that, have we quite seen it yet where he's the guy that can really control a high-pressure international match? And it's not a knock on him as a player. I love his style of rugby, but I think we all can accept that there's a difference when it comes to World Cups in terms of what you need. Things do get tense. Maybe a fly half more in the mould of Pollard could be more effective in those situations. So I would have some concerns there. I like that he's going to get the opportunity. And also Damian Willemse as well as the other fly half. I still am not sure what his best position is. We've seen him fullback. I'll speak about him in terms of the centres in a second, but I remember last year Nienaber speaking about they see Willemse as someone that could play 15-10 in the centre as well, possibly. So quite where he fits in, he's a bit more of a utility back, I suppose, even though they haven't listed him as that. They have listed him as a fly half. So what happens with fly half is intriguing into the game plan for the Springboks and how we see them playing. Can Libbok play that tight arm wrestle, tactical kicking kind of game? You guys let me know. You'd have all watched an awful lot of him. I know we've seen him be brilliant for the Stormers, but as I say, I still have some concerns maybe just at this level, but I hope I'm proved wrong. The other thing actually that the lack of Andre Pollard means is goal kicking and where that's going to come from. Now, Libbok, we've seen Libbok be good at kicking before. I think maybe because he's had a few rough games at international level that he is maybe unfairly tarnished at this moment, but it is a concern amongst Springbok fans. Willemse as well, I think we've seen be hit and miss. Could it be Faf de Klerk? Could he be the goal kicker? We've seen him do it quite a lot, I know, in the Premiership, and he has done it at times for South Africa. But given that, as I say, World Cups can be pretty tight and tense and games at fine margins, you really need a pretty reliable goal kicker. Where's that coming from at the moment for the Springboks? So those are just a few questions that maybe they need to answer. They've still got some warm-up games to go. They will be hoping to build ahead of that World Cup, that first game against Scotland. But we shall wait and see. Let's get on to the centres. I mentioned Lukhanyo Am and how I wondered whether he could still be there. I do have a slight concern about the balance of the midfield. If we look at the options there, Damien Dialende, Andre Esterhuizen and Jesse Creel as the centres. Dialende and Esterhuizen kind of 12s. And then Jesse Creel can play 13, but I've always felt with Creel that he's more seen as that squad player. You could put him on the wing. He can play 13. He can do a decent job. I don't dislike him at all, but I'm just not sure. Could he be that frontline guy as well? I'm not so sure. And then when I mentioned what I mentioned previously about Willemse and whether they maybe see him in the centres, I know we haven't seen much of him there, and maybe it's unlikely that that's going to happen at a World Cup. But even how he would fit into that equation, that balance of the midfield, I think all of a sudden losing Am is a bit of a concern for the Springboks. So there's a little bit of negativity in there for me. As I've said already, I still think it's a team that can do some damage. But yeah, maybe fly half into that midfield, quite exactly how they're going to piece that together. That's, I think, got to be a pretty big focus over the last few warm-up games for the Boks. Let's finish things off. Scrum half and hooker. 4 scrum halves. I have no idea why. So 4 scrum halves by South Africa. Faf, Hendrikse, Reinach, Grant Williams. Hendrikse we haven't seen yet in a Springbok jersey this year. Same with Oxenche, actually. So I think those guys have got to get some game time before the World Cup kicks off. But yeah, I don't really know why, in all honesty. That seems a little strange. Particularly, and I mentioned hooker in the same breath there, the fact that they've only gone with 2 hookers. If one guy gets injured, you're going to have to call someone up and you don't have somebody already in camp. So, as I said at the top of the video, there are interesting selections there for South Africa. I feel like most of what I've probably focused upon is all a little bit negative. Let me reiterate again, I still look at that team, particularly kind of the back 5 of the scrum. Lots of different options there. Lots of really good options as well, actually, in terms of the power that they will bring. We know how good the front row has been over the last few years, or really since the last World Cup when they absolutely dominated England in that World Cup final. So I still think there's a skeleton there that can be put together to be very, very good at this World Cup. But I do think there are some questions. I just wonder whether Lukhanyo Am's going to come back in. I really do. But then if that's the case, why wouldn't you just name him in the squad and he can rehab and be there eventually? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Springboks, the team to defend the William Webb Ellis Trophy. That is the aim for them. A team selection with quite a few headlines, a few interesting bits and pieces in there. So I look forward to reading your comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.